Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening's webinar on traditional versus collaborative lawyers. I'm going to challenge some of what traditional lawyers' tendencies are. So we might get a bit blunt here. And as we go, if you have questions, please use the Q&A function rather than the chat function because we're on a webinar setting. I will have a look at those as we go, but tendency is to answer questions at the end. For those of you watching the replay, by all means, reach out to me, DM me, email me with your questions. The best place to find me is in Facebook, in the Legal Support for Women group. And those who are live are lucky enough to have a private Q&A after the recording. So let's dive in. When we face a legal challenge, there are so many emotions. Often the legal challenge is some kind of huge life event anyway, a separation, a death, losing a job, being bullied, losing a house, or struggling with debt, or buying something significant that doesn't turn out to be what you thought it was. And then you add a legal component on top, and we have stress, anxiety, sleepless nights. And there's a lot of fear as well around cost, around process, uncertainty, which generates a lot more of this fear as well. If I can take away some certainty and give you some practical advice about engaging with the legal industry, then hopefully I can reduce some fear so you can go, well, at least I know what to expect and what to look for to begin with as my first step. Up to 83% of women who face a legal challenge do not get professional advice. Now, that is a huge statistic. So if you haven't got advice, you're not alone. There's a whole lot of women who don't, for many reasons that I've already touched on in terms of fear. Then there's shame sometimes as well, stopping women from, they don't want to be judged, or they're already judging themselves so harshly for getting themselves into a mess, or they're people pleasing all the people around them and just wanting to keep the peace, so they give up their own rights. But then look, we're facing a system that is not set up for women, to be quite frank. It is an old-fashioned system that we've inherited from the UK as part of the Commonwealth. It is a system that has traditionally been men petitioning kings. Then the king couldn't get around as much. There were too many petitions, so he would appoint magistrates to certain areas. Men would petition magistrates. It was only the men that could own property and have problems. Then the laws became too complex, so there ended up being special people who would advocate on behalf of others and get to know the magistrate so that they could smooth the problems over. And hence the legal industry was born. So you can see that we have that as a progression. We also have common law that's based on a reasonable person test, which is actually a male test. It's based on how a reasonable man would approach something, and removes a whole lot of different emotional reactions that a woman might have. It removes the way that women communicate as well. And there's a whole lot of archetypes and biases that are built in around how a woman should appear, what a woman should or shouldn't do. And it doesn't really take into account the complexities of who we are as real people. So why pay attention to me? Well, I am a lawyer. I'm not just someone complaining about the legal industry. I am an insider. I've run a law firm in Victoria for a decade. I still practice. I'm an accredited specialist. Hence, I've done more than just my bachelor degree. I've done a master's degree in applied law. I did an extra 12-month accreditation program with the State Law Institute to become a specialist. And still, I don't necessarily believe in the system that we have and want to do better for our clients. And I'm also a mediator. So That has retrained me in dispute resolution. Surprisingly, lawyers aren't really trained in dispute resolution at all. They're trained in advocacy, which is a lot of what we're going to be talking about tonight. Because we're going to learn about the differences in approach, the differences between what a collaborative lawyer, where they're coming from and what a collaborative process looks like versus going to a traditional lawyer and going through a traditional litigation path. Now, we recently had a federal court judge who retired and specifically said that litigation should be the absolute last resort. And yet the cases that we base everything off are based on that 3 to 5% of the worst cases that go all the way to judgment. Whereas, 97 to 95% of cases settle and can sort things out. So why are lawyers or traditional lawyers applying principles from the worst of the worst to everyone else? Well, let's dive in and learn a little bit around how lawyers operate and some of the things that just highlight for you how the legal industry works and how lawyers think. And so you can start questioning it, start thinking, well, what do I actually want? Because you are the consumer in this case, and it's your experience that matter. It's your life. So you should be in control of it. So one of the first things that lawyers often do all the way from the beginning is to start positioning you from the very first appointment that you have with a lawyer, because this is the way they think. And lawyers have been brainwashed by a certain process, law school in itself is a brainwashing process because you learn to solve problems in a certain way. You don't learn to solve problems in a collaborative way or think about people's interests. Again, you're applying a set of factual circumstances into a scenario that is based on the worst of the worst. So what a lawyer will do is start positioning you from your first appointment. And some of the questions that people ask in their first appointment often make lawyers think this is okay, because people come in and they go, what are my rights? What am I entitled to? It's one of the worst questions really to be asking, because again, you're asking for the scenario of the worst to be applied to you. You're turning your situation into a pie and just saying, well, how do I carve it up? Instead of actually saying, well, what do I want? What do others want? How can we actually be more creative here and come to an agreement that we create for ourselves? So as part of the positioning, the lawyer will tell you how to divide up that pie and give you an idea of what percentage you should be going for. Problem is that sometimes they're a little bit like a real estate agent, and they'll give you a fairly high percentage so that you'll work with them because you think that is fair and that is it sets your expectations. And then a lot of what that lawyer then has to do is chip away at the expectations that they set for you themselves, because they can't get you what they said they would. And so you end up compromising, you end up unhappy with your situation, your result. So that's all the way from the very beginning, a lawyer will position you. Whereas a collaborative lawyer won't, a collaborative practitioner will talk about what options you have and what processes are ahead of you. They will talk about the worst of the worst scenario, and they'll talk about other scenarios and options that you have. They will also start getting you to think about your values and what you want out of this, not tell you what you want and what you should go for. They will start explaining to you that, well, the traditional lawyer won't get financial advice. The traditional lawyer will tell you what percentage of the pie you should be getting, whether that is good for you or not. Whereas a collaborative lawyer will bring in a collaborative team, and one of those team members is a financial planner who does the projections on each of the different options. And so you will actually know and see which will be better off. But you can see that actually this lower percentage, I'll be fine with that. I can live with that because these other things are more important to me. And that is part of what I want to negotiate rather than just going for a dollar amount. So in doing that, the collaborative practitioner actually puts more responsibility back on you, which is what I said at the beginning. It is your life. It is your matter. You should be project managing and making the decisions along the way. A traditional lawyer will take your matter on for you, which can be a relief for sure. However, it's not, they don't have your best interests at heart often, which we'll talk about later in terms of fees. And ultimately, as I said, then they try and chisel you down to the expectation that they set, and you end up miserable anyway. Whereas if you start by thinking about your values and interests and what you actually want, and then work towards it, you're more than likely going to be happier with the result because you have more of an input and you're working towards a future goal for yourself. Which brings us to other versus self. So a traditional lawyer will see the overlying legal problem to your life and will just try and attack that legal problem. They won't actually delve into what caused it in the first place often, or try to resolve some of those underlying things. They also make it about increasing issues between people. So it doesn't narrow issues down. They work out what all the issues are, and then they start hounding at those issues. So people are driven further apart. Whereas with collaborative practice, one of the other collaborative professionals that is brought in is called a communication coach. They're often a psychologist, in fact, sometimes a well-trained mediator. But they're the ones that actually help you to articulate what the true issues are for you. So rather than have a lawyer pick out what the legal issues are, a collaborative practitioner will actually see you as a human with a legal challenge rather than just a legal problem to be solved. So a collaborative practitioner is much more aware of some of the underlying things that are going on and some of the things you may need to address, because sometimes the dispute is not about the legal thing. Sometimes it's actually about, as a 5-year-old, you didn't get the Christmas present that your brother or sister wanted, and that your brother or sister feels like you're the favorite, and so they're there to tear you down. Or whatever it is, there's some kind of underlying simmering thing that needs to be dealt with along the way. And hence, resolving a dispute collaboratively can actually be healing, can actually be constructive, can actually save relationships. So a traditional lawyer and a traditional litigation pathway will not save any relationship. You've got to be willing in a traditional pathway to go, oh, well, that relationship's over. There's nothing that I can recover from this. And so you have to pretty much live with the fact that you're tearing a family apart, or a business partnership apart, or whatever, that relationship in your life is done with. Whereas if you go down a collaborative pathway, it's often because you have a relationship that you need to salvage, whether it is a relationship with an ex where you need to parent children still for another 10 years or more, whether it is actually your brothers and sisters because mum or dad were the glue in the family and now there is no glue, but there's no reason there shouldn't be. Whether it is a business partnership, whether it is a work situation, there's often more damage done to relationships through a dispute than there needs to be And again, it's because traditional litigation increases issues and drives a wedge between people, and it becomes personal. Whereas with collaborative practice, you learn how to say what needs to be said in a safe environment where you have a communication coach to clarify things. And yes, there can be hurtful things. However, it's done in a context where then that can be explored and clarified, and each party can be supported through it. And then we have the motivation behind what lawyers are doing. So a traditional lawyer, sometimes they haven't thought through what they're doing. And I was certainly like that for a very long time in my practice, because I didn't know any other way. You know, we are stuck within a system that we need to work within. Sometimes there's no other leverage other than to get a matter into court, because the parties need it, because they've already fallen apart so much that we can't bring them together to discuss things. And to be honest, a lot of lawyers really are there because they do want to help people. The problem is that they've got a limited tool bag to be able to help. Whereas with collaborative practitioners, they actually don't want to do any harm, and they don't have any other interest other than trying to resolve it collaboratively. So part of the agreement that you have with a collaborative practitioner is, if the matter can't settle in the collaborative process, they can't act for you in any other means. So they are absolutely committed 100% to getting this resolution for you in a collaborative way. Whereas a traditional lawyer wouldn't make that commitment. They will resort to and default to litigation, unfortunately. And part of that, I think on my next slide, has to do with costs. So I alluded to this earlier with a conflict of interest. Traditional lawyers, particularly if they're charging on an hourly basis, quite often have a conflict of interest, because it's in their interest for a matter to be prolonged. Not that a lot of lawyers actually want that, but that's the business model. The longer something takes to resolve, the more they get paid, unfortunately. And so then you have to think about handing your life over to someone else and have them project manage your legal matter for you when they are benefiting from being inefficient. It just doesn't sit right. So if you're keeping the project management yourself, your collaborative practitioner is working side by side with you. They're your decisions. You decide how many meetings you have. I'm not saying necessarily that collaborative practice is cheaper, because again, you're in control of how many times the group meets. It might have to meet 3 times, which means you have individual meetings with your lawyer 6 times, and you have a couple of individual meetings with your financial planner, and then you have a couple of 3 joint sessions. A joint session wouldn't go for more than 2 or 3 hours, so people aren't exhausted by the process. But you've got to understand that you're paying for the time of multiple professionals throughout this process. The other party has the same thing. So it's not necessarily a cheap process. However, it can be cheaper than spending tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars and 12 to 18 months of your time in and out of court. Whereas with a collaborative process, you know, if you have 3 meetings over 3 months, it's done. Your relationships are saved. You've also learnt how to communicate with each other better. You've had it modeled to you how a professional collaborative team works together to communicate. So you've not only built skill, but you've also worked through a process together, which it might be the first time that you've ever done deep communication and resolved something that you can both live with. So, I mean, that's the challenging part of the webinar. And so now we will head towards some Q&A. So thinking then what are your options moving forward? So you've learnt a fair bit tonight about what to expect from a traditional lawyer versus what you can expect from someone who does things collaboratively. Now, a collaborative practitioner is actually registered as a collaborative practitioner. A lot of traditional lawyers will say that they practice collaboratively, but they're not collaboratively trained and they're not registered as a collaborative practitioner. So there is actually training to be able to be registered as a collaborative practitioner. And each state has a state body for a collaborative practitioners association. So you can look it up in your state for a directory of practitioners. So you can take what you learn and implement that yourself today. You can also do it supported. So part of Legally Wise Women is that I can support people with more of this knowledge and have access to my network, and for me to help and guide you through with Q&As, with resources that I have, with intention setting as well to keep you on track. So there is a community that we're building here with like-minded women that you may not otherwise be able to find, because you hear horror stories, but you don't actually find those women who've done things well. And so that's what we are building together. Hence Legally Wise Women. And there's a number of elements to that. There is the free Facebook group, which you can come along and join. And I put a couple of videos in there every week. So you're still building skill anyway, and you're still keeping your focus, and you've still got access to other women that are actually attracted to this, what I'm talking about. And you can ask a few questions in there as well. So that can sometimes be all that you need. You can ask me a question here or there too about what resources there are to start with. But then I also have an online platform where a lot of this stuff lives if you want to go to the next level. And there's 3 different levels within that community. There's the free level still, so you can be in there and have access to a whole lot of videos that I've put together. A lot of them are skill building, but there's also a lot around teaching you how to negotiate the legal industry. And then there's 2 other levels that are paid. There's a community level, and then there's the premium suite. So in the premium suite, what do you get? Well, that's where you get more access to me and you get me live. So every second week I have a Q&A. It is live on Zoom. You can come along and ask me a question. So every second week you have access to a lawyer to be asking questions. I also then do every other week, I alternate between just a power check-in and around the new moon, we actually do a women's circle. So it's a bit more interactive, and you actually get to hear what other women might be struggling with and support them just as I would. There's other resources in there. There's hundreds of videos. So you do get that. The hundreds of videos are available at the lower levels as well. But in the premium suite, you get access to me, you get my courses that I've created. So I have done Legal Business Basics for the business women. I've done the course How to Find and Hire the Right Lawyer, and I've done How to Negotiate for What You Want. So there's a whole lot of self-learning in there. The premium members also get Word templates that I've developed. So if you're doing things yourself, you can download the Word templates. There's videos there about how to use them, and you can ask me to put more in and I will do that. The lower levels also get access to the Q&A recording, so they don't get me live, but they will see other questions that people have asked and they'll be able to learn from that as well. Other bonuses are also other curated webinars and things that I do, so that all goes in there. Special guests, and also my podcast is Applied Wisdom, and so you get the special video content for those podcast guests as well. So that's where to go for the free trial. Now I'm going to take some Q&A. So for those who are watching the replay, I've given you the places where you can find me. Best place to find me is on Facebook. Just jump into that group. Again, that group is Legal Support for Women. And it's the best place to start. You can ask me a question there or two. But make use of the free trial, have a look around and see what kind of value you can get. And again, these are pay by the month. Top level premium suite is only $79 a month to have access to a lawyer once a week. I usually charge $500 an hour in my law practice. So $75 a month, there's no ongoing commitment. So if your matter resolves within a couple of months and you go down to the free level, no skin off my nose. I'm just there because I want you to have the resources to have a better experience. So yes, for those watching the replay, I'm going to stop the recording because I've got a couple of questions here with these ladies. If you want to come along to a webinar live so you actually get to ask me questions, you're quite welcome to. So I look forward to seeing you another time.